Hello everybody. Today we learn translation study. First of all, I'd like to tell you something about the general introduction. We will have to consider different views or points about translation, and also we learn some contextual analysis, grammatical analysis in translation, and also we have to go through cohesion analysis, kinds of translation, problems of scientific and technical discourse, and evaluating a translation. But first of all, I'd like to say something about this. You should know that we learn all about the theory in general. We have to learn different viewpoints of different researchers and also translators about how to translate the text or discourse. You know that it is rather difficult for you when we learned how to translate a text from English into Vietnamese and also from Vietnamese into English. And there are also some questions for you to consider. What is the contextual grammatical analysis in translation? And what are the cohesion analysis and also the kind of translation and problems of scientific and technical discourse and evaluating a translation? And now we have a general introduction, the current views on translation. One point is that we have to learn all things about the theory of doing the translation. You should know that this is not the practical translation, but we learn just the theory. Okay, remember that. Now, first of all, we have a definition about translation. Translation is an activity of enormous important in the world and the modern world, and it is a subject of interest not only to linguists, professional and amateur translator and language teachers, but also the electronic engineers and mathematicians. Books and articles on translation have been written by specialists in all these fields. And discussion about the theories of translation are so too often concerned with the distinction between the literary and non-literary text, between the prose and poetry, or between the technicals and article, non-physics and run-of-the-mill commercial correspondence. In order to understand the nature of translation, the focus should not be on the different type of discourse, but on the processes and the procedure involved in any or kind of interlingual communication. In order to do the translation, we have to put into the consideration some of the matter about interlingual communication. You know that doing the translation is the process of communication. Now, here we have to consider the short text, including the production, transmission, and history of interpretation. And the second thing that is the language is involved in restructuring the source language message into the receptor or target language. 3. We have to pay attention to the communication event, which constitute the setting of the source message and the translated text. And 4. We have to consider the variety of code involved in the respective communication event. So, totally, there are 4 tasks you have to put into consideration. There are also four different perspectives. We have to regard them. They are philological, linguistic, communicative, and social semiotic. Those four major perspectives on the problem of interlingual communication should not be regarded as competitive or antagonistic. And in doing translation, you have to consider how to understand the nature of translating, and you have to pay attention to the source text, the target text. Yeah, both. So, what is the source text? Yeah, the source text, that is the text that is the base for you to do the translation. For example, when you do the translation from English into you have to translate into English into Vietnamese. So English is the source text or source language, and Vietnamese, that is the target language or target text, and vice versa. And now we have some problem with the translation theory. The problem with translation theory is that it has to meet the great demand which has made of it. Greater involvement in the actual process of translating, but to tell the translator how to translate is not the translation theory. Now, we have some more current views on translation. First of all, we consider, have a look at the researcher Nida. Yeah, Nida, the researcher and also the translator. Nida theory of translating consists of three procedures of analysis: deep, structure, transfer, and restructuring. Yeah, and there are totally three procedures. We have to analyze the structures of the source language text, and the second procedure, you have to do the transferring, and the third part that you have to restructure, the language in the target text. And now the analysis consists essentially in the back transformation to a near kernel level. Yeah, that is the basic level. Actually, there are several steps of analysis or stages of analysis. Now we have to consider some stages of analysis. Now the first one, that is the lexical grammatical feature of the immediate unit. You have to consider the grammatical structures and also the structures of the lexicon. And also you have to pay attention to the discourse context. And third, the communicative context. And cultural context of the source language, and also the cultural context of the receptor language. It means the target language. And now the second one, that is the Catford. Catford defined the translation. Now here, translation is the replacement of a textual material in one language by the equivalent textual material in another language. The term textual material underlines the fact that sometimes it's not the entirety of the source language translation, which is translated at one more level. There may be simple replacement by non-equivalent of the target language material. Catford also argued that the theory of translation is concerned with a certain type of relation between languages and is consequently a branch of comparative linguistics. And so now when doing the translation process, the researcher can pay attention to the several stages and also some phenomena. Like the phonological, the graphological, and grammatical, lexical pattern. There are also some broad type of categories that he has to pay attention to. That is the extent, the level, the extent of translation, and the level and the ranks of translation. And now we move on to Wilson active animation. Yeah, they have a definition on translation here. Translation is a transfer process, which same as the transformation of the written language text into an optimally equivalent text text. And it requires the syntactic and semantic and pragmatic understanding and the analytical process of the short language. For active animation, they pay attention to the text rather on the language. But the Mason, however, he does not believe in the ruling and the benefit of a constructive linguistics completely. It can be useful at the certain level. So this researcher pay attention to the different level of doing the translation. There may be several levels in translation, so we have to pay attention to this. The next one, that is the Bell. So according to Bell, when we do the translation, we have to be able to understand different fields and also different areas in order to translate. In other words, we have to give a specification of translator competence. Bell pay attention to the competence of the translator. He argued that the professional and technical translator has access to 5 distinct kinds of knowledge. Yeah, he had to pay attention to the different aspects of doing translation. Now we have a target language knowledge. Yeah, textile knowledge, short language knowledge, or subject area knowledge, and constructive knowledge. There are totally 5 areas he has to pay attention to in doing the translation. On many sides of the relevance of linguistics to translation has been also critiqued, or worse, or neglected. In 1991, Bell showed his contempt for such a skeptical attitude. He finds it paradoxical that many translation theorists should make little systematic use of techniques and insight offered by linguistics. And now we move on to the next part. And that is Malinowski. He paid attention to the context situation. In this case, we have to analyze the context. In other words, it is called contextual analysis. It is very important for us to pay attention to the context. Without context, you cannot understand the whole text at all. It will be very necessary, and also it is rather easy for us if we understand the context of the whole text. Malinowski, he had tried to understand the context of situation, because in the situation there are different meanings in different aspects. So the context of situation provides the reader a lot of information. The meaning of words lie, you should know that the meaning of words lie in the ability to invoke the situation in which they have previously been used. And next, In order to analyze the context, where the analysis of context according to the researcher field. First, stated that all linguistics was a study, a meaning or the meaning was a function in a context. Now, first the heading was as follows. Now, the participant of the situation. When we do the translation, we have to pay attention to several matters. Now, according to first, the first matter here, participant of the situation. Second, the action of the participant. Yeah, we have to consider the action. And the third, the other relevant features of situation, the surrounding objects and event. In this case, we have to considering the surrounding object. It is rather necessary because they provide the general situation. 4. The effect of the verbal action. Yeah, what changes were brought. And what about tell him model or context? And tell him he has a lot more, more of aspect to pay attention to. Now, for example, tell him pay attention to totally 8 aspects. Now, first, the form and content of the message. Yeah, tell him try to find out the message of the sentence, of the paragraph, even in the text. Because when we do the translation, we have to try to find out the real message of the writer. And we have to put the message in another kind of language. Now, the setting. The setting, that is actually it is the environment for us to make a guess to understand the situation. And the third, that is the participant. The participant here means the writer and the reader. Yeah, sometimes we have a different kind of participant. 4. That is the intent, the intention and the effect of the communication. Yeah, the intention of the writer. And the key. So, what is the key? Actually, the key here is called the main thing in the circumstances and the situation of the context. And the medium, that is the way we put the thing, we put the words. Okay, that's the way we express the message or the idea. And the genre. The genre may be poetry or the prose. And the norm of interaction. What about holiday? In holiday mode, we have to pay attention to the analysis in another direction. There are totally 3 things that holiday has to analyze the context. He paid attention to 3 matters: feel, tenor, and mode. So what are they? Now, feel. Feel refers to the subject matter. It may be similar to the certain usage of the term domain in the computational linguistics. It shows what is happening. Yeah, to whom, where, and when, and why the matter is happening. I repeat, feel means what is happening. Now, tenor. What is tenor? Tenor refers to the social relation existing between the interactant in a speech situation. It includes the relation of formality, power, and effect. The manager, the clerk, the father, the son. That is called the influence. Tenor influences the interpersonal choices and the linguistic system, and thereby its effect, the role of the structures and the strategy chosen to activate the linguistic exchange. So totally, when we talk about the tenor, we should understand that we refer to the social relation, okay, among participants. It means that that is a relationship between the writer and the reader, and the speaker and the listener. Now, mode. What is a mode? Mode describes the way the language is being used, whether it is in the spoken form or the written form, or written to be spoken. As well as the rhetorical mode, we have expository, instructive, persuasive, etc. And now next, we have to understand the concept of grammatical analysis. Actually, it is called systematic functional grammar and translation. So, in the systematic functional grammar, we have three meta functions. Here, we have ideational function, interpersonal, and textual. Here they are reflected in the huge system of network. It specifies the meaning potential. And later on we will try to understand the three meta functions of the grammatical analysis or systematic functional grammar. Now we have a look at the features. Now, language is used to express the meaning and to perform various functions in the different contexts and situations in our daily life. Its grammar is the way in which language is organized. So, systematic grammar and also some research try to pay attention to the choices in the set of system, and we have a different pattern of linguistic choice. We have to try to notice the choices are appropriate or suitable or unsuitable when we do the translation. There are totally three meta functions of the language. So now we will go into the detail into the concept. The speaker or the writer can be seen to have made lexical grammatical choices to represent the world, both imaginary and real, abstract and concrete. We have ideas in a meta function. Yeah. And next, we have to convey the relationship to the listeners and the reader. And that is called interpersonal. And we have to organize the presentation of the message. So it is called textual meta function. So I repeat, when we have an ideal listener, we have to rearrange the imaginary and the real, the abstract, and the concrete. And now next, we will go into detail on the role of the grammatical analysis in translation. Ideational meta function. Here now we have the system, or another word we have a process type. We have an experiential and logical method function. In this case, we have to mention the process also the participant. We have a three kind of relation. We have to mention, and they are addition, causality, temporarily. And another concept we have to put in mind, that is called transitivity. Transitivity is a semantic concept, and that examine how meaning is represented in the clause. And a transitivity system is composed of 6 processes that represent human experience in terms of physical and philosophical action. So we have different kind of processes. And now we have material and behavioral. For thinking and speaking action, we have a mental and verbal. And for the action that is the existence of something or someone, the identifying feature, we have a existential and relational. And now we move on to the next meaning. That is called interpersonal meaning. We have to pay attention to the mood structure. So, what is the mood structure? Whenever we think of mood, we think of the 2 aspects. Actually, we have to consider the 2 aspects. They are called indicative mood, and they are called imperative mood. So, there are 2 kinds of mood I mentioned here, which is mentioned here. I repeat, they are indicative mood and imperative mood. And also the role change when we have to have a look at the modality. With the proposition, the positive and negative part in the mood assert, deny or deny what is stated in the residue. For example, in this we have a mood adjunct. For example, probably, the common adjunct we have unfortunately. Now, the textual meaning and the co-textual effects on how the structures are produced by underlying the linguistic system of work. This level of description and answer the question of what text is doing in creating an additional word. In this case, we have to pay attention to the mode of writing, and that is called internal organization, communicative nature of text. And now we have information structure. We have the concept of the given information, the new information, and sometimes we have the use of theme and rhyme. So, theme is the departure point of the speaker has chosen for his or her text. In English, theme only with the clause depend for it or the orientation within the context. Remember that a theme is only in the initial part of the sentence, and the beginning of the sentence. For the textual, we have to consider the discord marker conjunctive, and that is called the conjunct. For interpersonal meaning, we have to pay attention to vocative. And that means the way we speak to each other. Vocative, mood structures, and adjunct. Theme can combine to create the multiple theme, but each is a topical theme, and sometimes the first word carrying the meaning and the an expressor is stance realized by the participant, process, and circumstance. And now we have the kinds of theme. The most common marked theme utilized here, we have a different form of the marked theme. Adverbial group, prepositional phrases, or circumstantial adjuncts. And now cohesion. So what is the cohesion? Cohesion can be achieved through the use of grammatical and lexical words. The distinction between the two kinds of words given by Descartes, who argue that lexical words carry higher information content and are syntactically structured by the grammatical words. In identifying the 5 types of cohesion, we have several things here. First of all, we have a reference. The word that is called refer. And now we have a different kind of reference. Pronominal, demonstrative, definite article, and comparative. And now next, we have a conjunction. Several kinds of conjunction. Additive, adversative, causal, temporal, and continuative. And 3. We have a lexical reiteration. Remember that the condition that we have to read the same item, synonymous and superordinate and general item. And also we have a 2 patterns of the collocation. Collocation and substitution, ellipses. And those are the things that try to create cohesion in English. Now we go into detail for the sum of the aspect here of the cohesion analysis. The term reference is traditionally used in semantics to define the relationship between the word and what is pointed to in real world, but in other day and Hassan's model, it simply refers to the relationship between 2 linguistic expressions in the textual sense, though a reference occurs when the reader listener has to retrieve the identities of what being talked about, or by referring to another expression in the same context. And now we have several kinds of reference. We have anaphoric, cataphoric, and exophoric. So, what are the kinds of reference? First of all, we have an anaphoric reference. And this is an item in the text form, a cohesive link with another item which has been already occurred. Now, for example, Nam is a good student, but in the second sentence we say he is a very strong. So he talk about Nam. So this is called anaphoric reference. The second kind, cataphoric reference. This is an item in the text form. It forms a cohesive link with another item which occurs later. Of course, the subject refers to that item, given that the following in the beginning of the text has walked around the corner and stopped dead. It was the biggest dog I've ever seen, so it referred to the dog. Now the next kind, exophoric reference. An item and the text refer to something completely outside the text, but understandable from the context. For example, can you give me those books? So we may have the note here, extra for reference. Here is another matter of cohesion, and the referring item links to something aside the text. Now, personal reference. For personal, we also have the character reference. It is a reference provided by individual who know you and can vouch for you for your characters and ability. When you are applying for jobs, you will undoubtedly be asked for references at some point during the hiring process. And for personal reference, we have the first person, the second person, and the third person. Yeah, so for the number of these, we have a singular and plural form. For demonstrative reference, it is very easy for us to understand. Also, keep in mind, for demonstrative reference, we have this, that, and the plural form we have these, thou. And also for the neutral one, we have the, near, far. And for places, we may have here, there. Okay, and for time, we have now, then. Okay, different kind of concept when we refer to demonstrative reference. For comparative reference, we have we should learn the some of the words that they are often used here. The same, equal, similar, different, else, better, more, etc. I think you should learn by heart. Now, what about substitution? Substitution is the replacement of the word or group or sentences segment by a dummy word. So what is dummy? And dummy, it means that is rather difficult for us to understand. The reader can fill in the correct element based on the predicting sentences. So substitution is the replacement of the language element into other in the bigger composition. Yeah, in order to get clearer difference, or to explain something certainly a certain language element, it is an item or item replaced by another item or items. There is a distinction between the substitution and reference, in which substitution is a realization in the wording rather than the meaning. So we have three kinds of substitution: nominal substitution, verbal, and clausal substitution. Yeah, we have three. And now we go into and also quickly about some kind of substitution, yeah, in detail. So you can have a look at the example here and try to write, yeah, try to invent some kind of substitution. Now, normal substitution. Here, nominal here, that is called noun. For the nominal substitution, we often use one or ones. One for the singular, ones, that's for a plural form. So, we have to use some other kind, this one, another one, the biggest one, okay? And it is rather helpful for you. Now next, the second kind of substitution, and that is called verbal substitution. In this case, we can use the word do. Okay, do so, do it, do this, do that. Yeah, only do. That is called verbal substitution. And clausal substitution. In the case of clausal substitution, the whole clause is substituted for. Clausal substitution is more typical or oral speech than the written text. There are two clausal substitute. Now we have another word, so. Okay, if I say, I think so. Okay, they think not. Okay, so we have two words, so and not. Yeah, and this word can replace a clause. So, it's called clausal substitution. What about ellipsis? Ellipsis is the omission of the word or part of sentence. It occurs when some essential structural elements are omitted from a sentence or clause that can only be recovered by referring to an element in the preceding text. Yeah, now we also have the other kinds of ellipses. We have a nominal ellipsis. It means that some of the noun can be omitted. And of course, we have to replace the noun with possessive, demonstrative. For example, we have this, that, the, those. And sometimes we use which to show the nominal ellipses. Usually, we have some datics. For example, we have each, every, all, but, any, either, neither, no, so, etc. Now we have a verbal ellipsis. In this case, we may have to throw away the operator ellipsis, and there are two kinds, operator and lexical ellipsis. In the case of lexical ellipsis, the notional verb is omitted from the verbal group. It can happen only when if the operator stands for the whole verb group. In case of verbs used in the simple present or simple past, substitution is used instead of ellipsis. Operator ellipsis involved in the omission of operators, and the lexical verb always remain intact. In operator ellipsis, the subject is also always omitted from the clause. And now we have a clausal ellipsis. That means a clause disappears. But in order to recognize whether it is a clause or not, we have some kind of word to pay attention to. For example, this is a kind of yes-no question, W8 question. We have some kind of direct, indirect responses to this question. We have reporters, clauses, clause complexes, which are two or more clauses that are directly related in structure. And the next concept, that is called conjunctive cohesion. A way of creating cohesion is through discord marker and conjunction. Discord marker are linguistic elements used by the speaker. The writer is the interpretation of the text. And conjunction, you have to know that conjunction can act as a cohesive tie between clauses or sections of text in such a way as to demonstrate a meaningful pattern between them through those conjunctive relations are not tied to any particular sequence in the expression. And so now we have some kind of conjunction here, additive, adversative, causal and temporal conjunction. Additive here mean and. Adversative here, that means the contrary. We have a still, we have a but, yet, whereas, etc. And for causal, the causal we have then, for, because, for this reason, as a result, etc. You can learn by heart some of the phrases and words. The last common thing we have a conjunctive category is the temporal here, and linked by a similar sequence of time. And now we have also a kind of reiteration. Reiteration is realized when there can be seen some kind of repetition in the text which establishes the continuity of the text. We have several ways now: humor, savoring, stalling, expanding. And next we have a synonymy. Synonymy, sometimes we use synonymy to try to find out the real. We group the synonym together, and then we try to find out the certain circumstance. And next, antonym. Antonym are words of the same part of speech, but they are opposite in meaning. We may have some kind of antonym, antonym proper, derivation antonym. And also we have a superordinate. In this case we have a hypernym and subordinate. Hypernym. In the meronymy, we have to pay attention to the relationship between the whole and the part. Now, what about general word? In doing the translation, we also have to the general words. And those are the words that are grouped according to the subjects to which they are related. Words are classified according to the character of their meaning and origin. Then generic word is the one that pertain to a class or related thing, such as fabric, shop, and products. Another concept we have to bear in mind, that is called collocation. A collocation is a group of words that easily go together. For example, in English, we easily say heavy rain. It's correct grammatically to say strong rain or big rain, but both these sound completely changed. So a native English speaker would never say big rain. If you use the normal collocation, you say heavy rain. Your English will sound a lot better. So, in order to try to find out the collocation, think of the structures. And we have a different kind of collocation. Resultative, modification, and contextual collocation. And also we have some typical criteria for collocation here. We have non-compositionality, non-substitutability, and non-modifiability. And now we can direct kind of translation into the other aspect. We have a scaffold. Scaffold divide the three aspects of translation differently. So they are extent, level, and ranks. Now we go into detail. Now based on the extent, we have the kinds of translation here. Full translation. So what is the full translation? Each is the type of translation in which the entire source language text is reproduced. And partial, the second one, partial translation. It means that there are only some part of the source language text can be or to be translated. In terms of level, the type of translation are total translation, restricted translation. It is the replacement of the source language textual material with equivalent of target language material at only one level. In terms of ranks, translation is divided into rank-bound translation, unbounded translation. For unbounded translation, it means it can move freely up and down in the rank scale. And for Newmark, this researcher think of translation in different aspects and different way. Now, first of all, we have word-for-word translation. It is much clear. It is clearer and clearer for the reader. For this kind of translation, we only translate the very easy text. Second one, we have a literal translation. For literal translation, we have to pay attention to the grammatical construction. What about faithful translation? In this case, we have to produce the precise, the contextual meaning of the original within the constraint of the target language grammatical structure. And semantic translation. In this case, we try to find out the real message. And we have to think of the aesthetics value. Adaptation. Which is the first form of translation, and it is mainly for plays and poetry. Now, free translation. It produces the target language text without the style, the form, the command of the original. And idiomatic translation. It reproduces the message of the original but tends to distort the nuances of meaning by preferring colloquialism and idioms where these do not exist in the original. And the next, we have a communicative translation. In this case, it is rather free for you to render the exact contextual meaning of the original in such a way that both content and language are readily acceptable and comprehensible to the readership. And also, we continue to look at the kind of translation. This is the lesson. According to lesson, translation is classified into main types. They are form-based and meaning-based translation. The form-based translation attempts to follow the form of source language and is known as literal translation, while the meaning-based translation makes every effort to communicate the meaning of the source language text in the natural forms of the receptor language. Such translation is called idiomatic translation. It means that the translator has to make a lot of guess. And now it's a high time we pay attention to some kind of problem related to translation when we have some kind of text technical discourse problem of the poetry and the prose translation. And now as the science and technology develop, new English words and used to express the new concept, techniques, invention come into existence. And these words have developed more rapidly during the last decades that dictionary cannot by no means tick up. This development has brought Vietnamese serious linguistic problem of expressing this ever-expanding wave of newly founded concept and technique for which no equivalent in Vietnamese exists. Scientific writers should be aware that when they are writing English, is their lingua franca. Lingua franca. And the text they are producing will probably be translated into other languages. And now we have some more specific problem of the scientific translation. The most problem the common problem are here: technical term, special expression, syntactic ambiguities, and grammatical metaphor. In order to be a scientific translator, we have to pay attention to the following point. And that is the broad knowledge of the subject matter of the text to be translated. And the thing we have to consider: a well-developed imagination that enables the translator to visualize the equivalent of process being described. And the third, we have to pay attention to intelligence to be able to fill in the missing links of our original text. In a sense of discrimination, to be able to choose the most suitable equivalent term from the literatures of the field from dictionary. And 5, the ability to use the one's own language with clarity, conciseness, and precision, and practical experience in translating from related field. And now we move on to some kind of problem of the word choice. In the word choice, we have a mixed words, misused word, ambiguous word, a word with negative connotation, and colloquialism. They have a different view, different point to consider. And now jargon, like a colloquialism. It is rather difficult for us to translate jargon words. They will be understood by selected audiences. It means that there are only some people, someone to know jargon. In some cases, that may be your target audience, but even so, you want to make your copywriting as accessible as possible to attract new customers. And next, misleading words. Advertising and business writers sometimes have a tendency to exaggerate. We all want other product services to sound appealing, and the design sometimes makes a bit of both to either word ultimate or even call product inexpensive. When it's actually quite pricey. And next, the problem of ordering element in interpreting syntactic ambiguity in the nominal group. The simple post-mort modification can be found in example here, president-elect. Yeah, this is the kind of problem that we have to pay attention to the position of the words and the phrases. And now there are some problem of rendering the time reference from Vietnamese into English. There are no tenses in Vietnamese. Vietnamese verbs are words that convey action. For example, bring, read, walk, and run. Or state of being, we have exist or stand. In most languages, a verb may agree with the person, gender, and number of some of its argument. In Vietnamese, we have a đã, đang, sẽ. Okay, that is the problem of the time. And for poetry translation, it's rather difficult for us to do the translation for poetry. So in order to do the translation of poetry or prose, we have to pay attention to type of poetry, the shape of a poem, the nuances of the word's meaning. Yeah. We have to consider the picture, the emotion. What about the translation of prose? In translation, doing the translation of prose, we have to face with the text, the missing references, the construction of grammar, the term, and the acronym, abbreviation maybe, the form, and the content. And the final part, that is evaluating translation. So, in order to evaluate, we have to consider the several things. In evaluating a translation, it is essential that the fundamental differences between the overt and covert translation can be taken into account. These two types of translation clearly make different demand on translation criticism. And for needle and table approach, they consider the behavioral heuristic views. We have to pay attention to informativeness or intelligibility. For standard approach, we have a hard estimation. In evaluating a translation, we have to consider the explicitity to take into account the interconnectedness of the context and also the text. And next, that is the four wheels approach. It is necessary to develop a comprehensive linguistic model of translation. We have to consider the source text, the translation, and the evaluation of the translation. For standard approach, when we evaluate, we pay attention to the feel, tenor, and mode. Okay, thank you for listening to me, and now the time is over. Yeah, time is up, and now, if you want to find something more about the theory, it is very difficult for you to understand the whole thing. So I hope that you try to post a lot of the thing that you want to understand on the forum. I try to give you some more explanation. Okay, and now I'd like to say goodbye to you all. Thank you.